Welcome to Harmony. Virgil Walker, Anthony Walker, Kevin Donahue joining me. We're going to talk today about Philip Anthony Mitchell, the lead pastor at 2819 Church in Atlanta, a popular church in Atlanta. He's been one of the boldest young ministers across the nation, particularly in the black church space. He's been somewhat considered as the Mike Todd with substance in the black church movement. And a couple of weeks ago, he gave a sermon about obedience and about young black men submitting to authority. And he told a personal story about himself and in interaction with the police, and said, hey, I couldn't let my ego get in the way if I wanted to survive. And he attached it all biblically. We'll play the clip of what he said that sparked a lot of conversation and controversy. Let's play the clip.
And I know there's bad cops out there. We know that. We know there's cops who's evil. Man, there's evil people in every industry preaching all that stuff. But man, not every killing of a black man was because of a bad cop. Some of that is because we have not taught our children to be, watch, obedient to authority. That some of the stuff we bring upon ourselves when we provoke authority. And what the Lord is teaching us in this moment is to be model citizens that obey the laws of the land even when they hurt.
So that clip went viral, and Philip Anthony Mitchell started getting a lot of blowback. And sure enough, he took to Instagram and issued an apology and said he knew that his words caused harm. A lot of black celebrities, including Jamie Foxx, went on his Instagram page or went on his YouTube page and complained. Everybody was upset. How dare Philip Anthony Mitchell suggest that young black men should submit to authority and make the analogies that he did. Virgil, because he's in Atlanta, the Atlanta area, in your area, this is in your backyard. I'm sure you're familiar with Philip Anthony Mitchell. Your reaction to this controversy and how it's played out?
Yeah, my initial thoughts were, good for him that he's saying the right kinds of things. I think in the context of the sermon that he provided, his words I thought landed well. The end of it, he said, stop, based upon the example he gave. He provided the context where he, could have gotten his ego and didn't. He then said, stop blaming white cops. He says that, teach your black kids to submit to authority, to obey authority. And I think all in all, that's a good message. But again, because of the Twitter sphere and because of his platform, it was heard much, far beyond his immediate context. And most of the people did not hear the setup or the context of the sermon at all. They just heard, stop blaming white cops for killing black kids, and a message that told black parents that they need to teach their kids to obey authority, and they didn't like it. We've been talking for a while about white fragility, and what we witnessed in this setting, in this instance, is black fragility. Black fragility has become a cultural idol. I say that because we can listen to a whole lot of preaching so long as we are not responsible or accountable for our own behavior. And that's what Philip Anthony Mitchell found out real quick. And that is when you hold folks accountable for their own behavior, and you have a large platform, and you're considered a powerful voice, even if that's a black voice, that folks won't like it. They'll have something to say about it. On the flip side of this, I was disappointed that such a powerful voice. I don't agree with everything that Philip Anthony Mitchell says. I'm still studying his theological bona fides, but at the same time, when you say right things, I have to say what he said was right and correct. The problem is that he bowed the knee with all of the vibrato, with all of the masculinity, with all of the boisterousness of his preaching. And if you're familiar with him, you know that, you hear that, you see that on his platform. He kowtowed like a little girl when it came to standing on his on his 2 feet to say what he said he meant, and what he meant was what he said. He backed down. He capitulated. He bowed the knee. He wasn't comfortable. I mean, if you read the whole, the entirety of his apology, it sounded like somebody wrote it for him, because he was reading all the right DEI kind of cultural sensitivities that Black culture experiences. That was disappointing to see.
Anthony, you're the only one leading the church. You deal with feedback and consequences when the church gets upset. How did you interpret his original sermon? I watched the entire hour to make sure I had the context, and I thought it was great. But how did you see it?
The only pushback I did too. I watched the whole thing as well. I did not see it real time. I did not hear the critique real time. I'm just now noticing the critique. I haven't paid attention to that part. But when I knew that it was a little hot and heavy, I said, let me watch the sermon first and then see how people were responding. In the sermon, the only critique I would give is this. Yes, his story that he gave, his personal testimony, that's true, and that happened to him. That's his experience. And what he pulled from that was, hey, obedience. I get that. And it aligns with what he was giving in the sermon. The only issue was he also, in that same thing, is giving a negative example of the cop. Like, there's no correction for what the cop did. I mean, there's a prime example of, okay, hey, the cop didn't do X, Y, Z as well. Now, here's what I should have done, because that's all he has control over. But in the sermon, he's speaking to everybody, and he's using this example as an example to teach. The reason why I critique that is, in his sermon, he also gives the conflict that Jesus was having in trying to navigate, if I say it this way, I'm going to empower these people. If I say it this way, I'm going to empower these people. And so this is why Christ responded to the tax issue the way that he did. He still spoke the truth, but he also challenged both sides. So in that example that he gave, you can still give that truth of, hey, you've got to be obedient. Parents, you need to teach your kids to be obedient, etc. And this is not a white cops are hunting down black kids dynamic. No. You need to teach your children. Yes. But because the example that he gave also includes, hey, we got a white cop here as well, which it didn't even matter the race of the cop. It is, I got to address this as well. Biblically, I look at the time when the Pharisees bring the woman who was caught in the act of adultery. Now, Jesus has got to tend to this. Like, I got to deal with this. But at the same time, he's correcting the audience that brings her. Which one of you? He's not giving her a pass by correcting them. He corrects them both. Go sin no more, and you guys examine yourself. So Philip had a chance to do that. And that's the only piece I would. But the entire sermon, he was unpacking everything. He exegeted the text well. He did history and all of that. He did all of that well. That's where I think people, now are people getting all in their emotions and all of this? I'm saying, like, that's not where he was going. And I don't think that he should have apologized from that standpoint. I would have, if I was in his case, here's what I was saying. But his apology now is again empowering those, which I know, well, I would hope, I should say, I hope that's not what he's trying to do. I don't know much about him. I know a lot of people that like him. He's in Virgil's jurisdiction, so I'll let Virgil take care of that. But that's my take on my take on that.
So there's preaching the truth, then there's public relations. And I think they don't cross paths. I think, and if you're going to be a leader of a church, you have to take your stand, right? Yeah. And it's like putting on the armor of God, like, because you're going to get hit. Culture does not want the truth. Culture wants chaos. Culture does not want Christ. So to capitulate how he did, and again, I'm not in his shoes, but I think you need to stand where you stand. Now, listen, I'm no fan of government workers, including cops. They're armed government workers. However, we do have to submit to the rules of society.
Yeah.
We do it anyway.
Yeah.
We drive on the right side of the road. I could be a revolutionary and drive on the wrong side of the road. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to police interactions, white, black, it doesn't matter. You do have to submit and surrender, and they have legal authority to kill you, even legal authority if you act a certain way. I've been pulled over, never had an incident. I've been pulled over in Houston, had 6 cops draw their guns on me.
Yeah.
I was in the wrong place, wrong time. Look, I'm alive today because I capitulated or I surrendered or submitted to their authority, and they were serious, But I think that's the key here: is there's truth in preaching, and then there's PR, and PR will wreck your world every single time.
As you say that, I remember for our congregation, it was probably around 2017, when we began to put cameras in. That was right at the time where, streaming your services and things. And I grew up in a small country church, and the worship service, the worship setting, the familial setting, all the families and things, that was just such a sacred space. And I thought about, we set a camera up there and people are going to see what, and they're not going to know, they're not going to have any context. I just was, and we eventually did it, but I say all of that to say this: his congregation real time, because they somewhat know him. I'm not sure the size. I know they've grown tremendously, but they may be able to interpret exactly what he meant, exactly what he was saying. They're amening the message. Yes, we got, I got all that. And he knows how to challenge them. Where you introduce the PR aspect is that he has this whole, digital disciples, and you're speaking simultaneously to the world. And I grew up in this tradition, man, that, real ministry is local, right? I can't pastor the entire world and also be concerned about Highway to the World. Like, I'm called to deal with this congregation. Now, if others hear my message, God bless you, but this is what I'm called to do. So that's where now, with the advent of, internet sermons and all this kind of thing, now you do introduce this PR aspect. I mean, imagine if somebody gets a clip of, something misconstrued that Jesus says, and they see it, and that's it. And that's what everything, the initial clip that I got about this sermon, I had to go dig to find the original sermon. The initial clip is one of the clips where everybody's just clipping this segment and doesn't have the context. So I say that to say, now we do have an element where people are concerned about, man, how is this going to look to our audience and to those who are watching? No, man, you got to preach to that congregation. Yes, and give them what God has put on your heart to give them, challenge them, correct them, teach them, encourage them. And again, what he says, I get it. I know the game. Last thing before you get in, Jason, I'll say this. He is, there are preachers who preach by a manuscript. They write their entire sermon word for word out, and they're basically reading it. And then there are those who preach from Cliff Notes. I preach from Cliff Notes and the scripture itself. I've prayed over my message all week. I do that. Sometimes in that style of preaching, you can grab an analogy, you can grab an example. He's had a couple of incidences I was looking up today where he's said something that was, probably shouldn't, and it was like, okay, knowing that that's his style, he's going to deal with that. But with his congregation, they know him. So I know what he meant by that example. I know the rest of the world would not have that context.
You've made two great points. You made some great points, Anthony, and where I want to pick up is I feel like he blew an opportunity because both of your points are actually connected. He's got a relationship with that church, and so what a minister should be doing is there are no one-off sermons. Every sermon's connected. Every great leader, coach, minister, or whatever, they're really just saying the same thing over and over and over again. You're every Sunday you just wake up. How am I going to tell these people that they need Jesus today? How am I going to tell it to them in an original way? And so he should have been wise enough to say, hey, man, I'm going to say something that's going to be provocative, is perhaps because of the spotlight on me, it's going to be controversial. As a broadcaster, I know the things that are like, man, when I say this, there's going to be a reaction. And then I need to be prepared. What am I going to do in the aftermath of that reaction? And when you're in a relationship as a church leader, every sermon, there should be a through line and a connection. And so he could have come back the next week, now that he's got all this attention and spotlight, and say, let me finish this sermon here. Last week, I told you about how your son or husband or brother should respond and how we should submit to authority. This week, I'm going to tell you how we got in this position where the authorities have way too much power and this Federal Reserve banking system that we have, because he may have to go way deep down the rabbit hole to get people to understand, like, hey, man, we got a system where we got lawless cops and cops that spend way too much time in the trenches with no relief. They're underpaid. They're dealing with constant stress, and then they become criminals themselves. He could have used all that attention to explain the other side of the argument. It doesn't all have to be packed on day one. That's why in the past week, we did this show on Shannon Sharp. Then I unpacked this element of the Shannon Sharp deal. And now this one. It's all connected. Instead, he just threw up a white flag, apologized and surrendered and said, I won't do that again, instead of continuing the conversation. He's got spotlight. He could have really enhanced. So and look, I'm older than him. I've been involved in a lot of controversies. And what generally speaking happens when you're after the truth, when your heart is just, I'm just going to follow the truth wherever it leads. Even when you make a misstep, it's an opportunity because you can correct your misstep while having all that attention, correct yourself, and then go to a larger point. What we've been trained to do is put out the PR fire and rush back to safe territory and safe ground. And I don't know who his elders are, what their level of experience is at dealing with controversy. And then a lot of times when you're a young guy and you're leading a powerful church, it's getting your ego gets out of control. It ain't nothing the elders can say to you. Who knows? Ooh. But there was a great opportunity here to double back down, correct any misstep, while making a larger point about, now here's the other side of the story. Here's how we got here. Virgil, hop back in.
Yeah, I think a part of the problem is the black church pastor who considers those he disciples, quote unquote, digitally as disciples. Those people are not disciples. Those are consumers. Those are people who are consuming your content for a brief period of time, and they move on. So they like your content if it agrees with them. They don't like your content if it disagrees with them. And to put the content out that he does, it requires a large effort on the part of the folks who are producing his material there at the church. I love what Anthony said about considering pastoring as local, because that's exactly what it is. It should be a local situation, a local context, a local congregation where people who are gathered around you are learning as you teach them the word of God. That's what's happening. The problem is he and those around him have become so focused on those who are in the digital discipleship arena that they've kowtowed to their needs. Those who are part of the quote unquote digital discipleship have made the decision that they didn't like what they were hearing, and either they were moved by quote unquote PR or some financial situation. Because I think I think there was a monetary component that caused him to be concerned about the blowback enough to where he'd write a letter and post it back in social media so that those who were giving him a hard time would actually walk back and relax a bit and let him revisit things. Jason, I think you're spot on. He had time to address the issue. So there's two factors to this. One is the issue with him and how he responded. The other is the issue with black folks who have no ability to contextualize anything. Like they automatically assume that because he said that about white cops, that the blowback was that there are black kids who've gotten killed by white cops, and so are you talking about them? Well, no, he's not talking about them. We all know that, and we all know that there's a large segment of our population, especially younger black males, who, when they see authority, like police officers, and have grown up in fatherless homes, who bow up against a cop, and how we need to do something to teach our young men to respect authority and to walk things back. And the story that he gave as it relates to that was wise counsel for them. I don't take anything away from what Anthony said about both sides. You always need a sword swings both ways. Absolutely, no doubt about it. But we can't cut one way without black culture violently erupting, or at least getting loud on social media to make it clear that they don't want that kind of rhetoric spoken about, even by a black pastor.
I just think, Virgil, I hear you. I'm going to slightly disagree, though, in terms of this man was blessed with an opportunity. He couldn't see it. But all of that controversy and blowback gave him an opportunity to come back the next week and go back at it again with more people watching and give a bigger, fuller context to. And I mean, Anthony, you're the experienced guy.
Yeah.
Y'all map out series of sermons.
You do.
And blah, blah, blah. You have to be wise enough to, okay, now they're ready for this part of the meal. Now they're ready for this part.
The only thing I'll say about that, though, Jason, is having done it for a number of years, you can plan out what you're going to say. You can even manuscript. And I know with my sermons every week, even though I may have 3 or 5 points, there's one takeaway that I want you to leave with. And I emphasize that all. You wouldn't believe how many times people come back to me and they go, man, but point 2 was just, man, that's not what I was emphasizing. I'm glad you got it. So I'm saying he, in his mind, when he stepped off stage, he probably felt like, okay, man, I hit that one. That was pretty good. And then the blowback. And that's where I'm saying the blowback, I don't believe comes from his congregation. Right. It came from the outside. And that's where if I preached and one of my deacons, one of my elders, they came to me, man, Anthony, you really, this, did you remember when you said that? And, yeah, man, I don't know that wasn't, I can hear it better then versus if somebody leaves a Facebook comment or Twitter, like, I don't know you. Like, did you hear the whole sermon? Did you get, and in this consumerism world that Virgil brings up, as I said, when you Google that sermon, the first 20 responses that come up is not the sermon. It's the clips. So, I hear you, Jason. You come from a journalistic perspective, you'll use anything for an effort to get that word out. You got a story, if it's controversial, if it's salacious or what have you, I'm going to tell the truth in this. In our arena, and especially following the way of Christ, I don't mind the controversy if what I'm giving you is biblical truth, because that's the dividing line. If you look in John chapter 6, Jesus tells a hard truth and many disciples leave. And he didn't, hey, y'all don't leave. Are y'all going to? Because what I said was true. Now, that's what I want to do. Now, if I get controversy because, man, I mishandled the text, or I mishandled something. Okay, now, even though it is an opportunity, now the way that I tend to handle it is different from what Philip would do. I would take that approach that you give. I would take that line because I believe an understanding takes care of a lot of things. So my post would be one of, hey, a lot of people are paying attention to this analogy that I gave. Let me explain to you why I gave that. Boom, 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 boom. By this point, I am not in any way justifying the cop, whether he's white, black, indifferent. This is what I was highlighting. And so for those that misunderstood, this was it. But yeah.
The other thing, as a journalist, I work at a different pace and rhythm in terms of when I was at a newspaper, I wrote 4 or 5 columns a week. And so it's just boom, boom, boom. Y'all once a week, then there's some stuff on Wednesday. Then you got all these other things. Not because you're lazy. It's like there's a lot to run the church. And so just when my only job is coming up with a column every day or many days as I can, or coming up with a provide. And so I work at a different pace and rhythm. And so he's like, if I get bogged down in this, now these other sermons that I've mapped out that are equally as important or even and maybe more important in his mind, I get it. But fascinating, interesting discussion. Thank you guys for joining me. Hope you guys in the audience enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on Harmony.